Texas is coming 9 days away, folks. Time to get locked in and geared up for the big showdown in Columbus. Welcome into the voice of college football, Ohio State Buckeyes Live. The two on either side of me, familiar faces, of course. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Tony Gerdeman, catch his work at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And it's the Buckeye Weekly podcast that you need to catch more than weekly. It's just about every day, I would think, at this point. Right, Tony?
Yeah, we were just recording our bold predictions for the season about for the last hour before I jumped on here. So it is that time. So we're about moving to 4, 5, 6 shows a week now.
Nice. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Excited that we don't have any interviews for 5 complete days here. We don't have to go into Columbus, and the lads are getting a little bit of a respite here before things really swing into high gear this weekend, and preparation for #1 Texas coming up next Saturday at noon on big noon Fox whatever. So there you go.
#1 and underdog Texas.
That's right. Crazy.
You don't go together.
Yeah. I did see a stat from Orange Bloods where the first start for a quarterback against a #1 team in the last 18 times, they're 0-18.
Yeah.
So
last 20, 25 years, something like that. That's crazy.
I wonder how many of those times that quarterback has been quarterbacking the #2 or #3 team in the country.
Not very often.
Right. And yes. I need to go find out like what's when the #1 team opens on the road against #2, what all of these different things. So many different research things that can be done, but just there's not enough time to get it done.
Yeah. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat, folks. We appreciate your super chat contributions. Keep in mind that Tony's busy, Steve's busy. They are here every week for us, delivering on Ohio State football talk. So please consider your contributions. And the Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Please, when you shop on Amazon, use the Amazon link. All right. I could go on a tirade about making guarantees and promises as an athlete. However, let's understand, Jimmy Johnson once said it well, I believe, when he said, I treat everyone fairly, but I don't treat them the same. Meaning certain guys have certain equity that they can bring to the table. And if you can deliver, you can deliver. Now, if Austin Saravalde would have said, I guarantee or I promise that we're going to beat Michigan this year, maybe that would carry just a little bit less weight. And maybe that's something that he shouldn't do. But coming from the best player in college football, I still am going to go through my little warning after you guys comment on this about that's not the smartest thing to do. But the guy's 19 years old. It's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. And I think regardless of the outcome of that game at the end of this season, he's still ticketed toward multi-millions of dollars in the NFL. So it's not going to hurt him. But I do have my thoughts about players guaranteeing games, Tony.
What did he say?
He said something like, we're going to I promise a win against Michigan. I will look it up to make sure that we're accurate.
When before the season, and I don't really get worked up about it. I guess it just depends on what they say. And I know he said something, but I don't really have any strong thoughts on it because players right now have to say so many different things. Like they're, especially in the era of the NIL, where they're out there a lot more and people want them to talk more. And so, certainly you're going to make promises like the Tim Tebow thing. You're never going to see anybody play harder than we will, that sort of thing. And I also don't know that promising wins is a huge thing, except for the week leading up to the game. I think for me, that's when it starts to matter. Stuff said in August and July or whatever doesn't really do much for me unless it's derogatory towards the opponent rather than positive towards yourself.
Yeah, I don't look at it as a negative or a positive. I think as it'll probably be forgotten by the time it comes around that week. Although, people do have long memories, I suppose. But it will be interesting. The byplay going back and forth between now and then, and keep predicting a victory. Ohio State is eventually going to break through against Michigan. And so one of these years you will get it right if you keep predicting a victory or promising a victory. But I'd rather that than excuses for why they lose and gosh, we're trying and all these other things. Don't tell me about trying hard. Show me the baby. Let's get it done.
I am seeing under a headline from CBS Sports. I'm not finding the exact quote, but Smith previously vowed never to lose to the Wolverines again after the 2024 defeat. So he had made that statement previously. What he said this week was about, I hate them. I don't want to quote that exactly. He said, yes, I hate them. Smith said, where did I learn that? High school recruiting. First came in, I made a mistake. I was wearing dark blue. Coach Bryant Hartline and Coach Keenan Bailey were like, you can't wear them colors here. And from that day forward, I was like, okay, it's real. And then he later states, I'm not a sore loser, but I hate losing. And losing to that team up north was pretty crazy. In the end, I think it really helped us play the way we did in the playoffs, but I didn't want to go to Ohio State and lose to the team up north. I just hate them, just something about them.
I can attest from my own personal experience that Keenan Bailey is very much a stickler on this. Like this was before he was even a full-time assistant, was just a quality control dude. The guys who are not full-time assistant coaches have to dress and shower in a different area, and they have to cross through the media work area in the atrium there at the Woody Hayes Center to get to that area. And if you're sitting in that area and you're wearing a blue shirt, as I was one day a few years ago, Keenan will come in and say, hey, man, you're wearing blue. That's not allowed here, and we're like, hey, man, I don't work for Ohio State. So, there you go. But it is what it is.
The alternative is a player saying, I don't mind losing to those guys. And of course, that's not the case. But absolutely, that loss sent them on the run that they had. And you can ask yourself, would they have done this without, would they have won a national championship without the loss to Michigan? I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to change it. I don't think let's go ahead and take the national championship off the table, get a win against Michigan and see how things go, because they certainly propelled them and it brought them together. And talking to the players at the NFL Combine after they left, they all said, like, you asked them what was the key moment of the season, and they said losing to Michigan, because that was the galvanizing aspect of the season and drove them forward. And yeah, I don't have any issues until you start talking negatively about the opponent, or the week of, when you start saying stuff that maybe you shouldn't.
I always thought they were the best team last year. That's why I picked them to win the national championship. Now, did I have the confidence that they were the 85 Bears and that much better than everyone else? No, I'm not saying that I had that kind of confidence that they were, but they certainly did separate themselves in those 4 games versus everybody else. There's no question about that. They were the superior team by far in college football last year during the playoff, and good enough to get into the playoff, and then you're 0-0. Here's my little rant on guaranteeing games. Post Joe Namath, who obviously made this a thing way back when, Super Bowl III, I'll put it this way. If I was an NFL head coach, and now I'll extend this to college football since these guys are making money as well, I would tell my team, you guys make all the guarantees you want. You make all the guarantees, but you have basically banked this game for us. You have guaranteed this game. Therefore, if we lose this game, you give up your paycheck. Your game check is forfeited because you have guaranteed the game. Therefore, that needs to be backed up. Therefore, you lose the game check if you lose the game because you've guaranteed the game. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut. Just go out and play and win the game, and let everyone know that you were the better team when we played the game. I just think it's silly, this promising, guaranteeing games. But again, we're talking about the best player in the country, and is it the end of the world? No, I'm not claiming that either. I don't think it's a smart thing to do, but I don't think it's like some egregiously stupid thing to do. It's fine. It's not going to affect him, that's for sure.
One of the issues is, like, you make that statement and then you lose, and the player's like, well, I did my part. I did enough. I I did enough to win. I don't know what everybody else's problem was, and then you can create some issues in the locker room that way.
Kevin Noon, of course, stopping by Big Me Podcast and, of course, BuckeyeHuddle.com for his work. Kevin, we're talking about Jeremiah Smith. Of course, he kind of doubled up or doubled down on his previous statements about promising to never lose to Michigan. And then this week it was a rant about hating Michigan, which I'm sure every Buckeye fan is going to love because the venom cannot be deep enough for these fans, and so they want that anti-John Cooper type rhetoric about Michigan, and so they love that. But in terms of a promise, I went on my little rant that players should not guarantee games.
No, but it sure gives us something to talk about when they do. So, I love the passion. I love the bulletin board material, whatever. People are like, say nothing, have no personality. That's boring. That's boring. There's not much that you can write about with that. So let's have a little fun. Let's talk a little, and get out there. Now, if Jeremiah could go out there and by all accounts and have a great game, and the final outcome may not come the way that everybody who's in here would like to see it go. But I think that if it keeps Jeremiah that much more focused and that much more driven, and keeps people from getting on his shoulder and tell him how great he is and how he is bigger than all this and needs to test NFL waters early, let him he can hate the Easter Bunny. I don't care.
The Easter Bunny.
That's the best I could come up with. I'm sorry. I was just doing an interview in Austin, Texas. That's why I'm late. So I don't know what I'm thinking about right now.
At first glance, I would kind of question the true hatred that somebody from Miami, Florida could have having played one game against Michigan. However, he's the one there every day bonding with his teammates, that's got scarlet and gray on, that's lifting weights, that's watching film, that's doing all the things, being a Buckeye 24/7, 365. That is certainly caught up with my 50 years of being a Buckeyes fan. So when put into that context, I have no issue with it. And if he says he hates them, God bless him.
It's one of the things I tell people all the time. The players hurt more after a loss to Michigan than the fans do. They put it all in there, and they're actually on the field doing it, and it's happening to them. You're just watching it, and not that you don't feel it or whatever, but they're in there. And so, yeah, the losses to Michigan hurt the fans, but then the players leave and they don't have their gold pants, and they're not going to get any, and that's something that stays with them forever. And so, yeah, people can move on. The fans can move on from a loss. When you win a national championship, you move on. And yeah, so do the players, but they don't have what other players have had since the losing streak has begun.
I hate it when you're not getting any.
Do you three have it in you to make a final statement about this Michigan NCAA final judgment? Because I don't know that I do. I'm talked out about it.
Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say. It was a total travesty, and they wasted everybody's time for 2 years. This just kind of shows you the disconnect between, the media and the NCAA and enforcement and all these things, because nobody had an idea that vacating wins or seasons wasn't even a possibility as a result of this, and why that committee didn't kick that back up to the board of directors or whoever and say, look, we've got an extraordinary situation here where these people obviously cheated to win football games. We really need to vacate these games. And why that wasn't broached or sent to a higher power or a governing committee to override that stupid ass rule, then that nobody ever foresaw that was going to be a problem, obviously. But, that was the stupid acidest part of it. And then to invoke we didn't want to penalize the innocents who just arrived there, like Bryce Underwood and some of these other people, when one of the people who was intricately involved in this was Sharon Moore, and he's the head coach now at Michigan and is basically off scot-free, other than a couple of years of this meaningless show cause thing, which is a total farce and a total joke. So, yeah, I don't know. The whole thing stinks to high heaven, and Michigan gets off of this scot-free. And again, you can do whatever you want. Just write a 10, 15, $20 million check, and you will be absolved of all wrongdoing. So there you go.
Kevin, do you want to go?
I mean, I think Steve took a lot of the good points there at this point. I mean, I think I've kind of just moved on from it. I did one show talking about it and just how toothless it was and sending the wrong message. And again, we know that in 99 out of 100 places in the multiverse, this would be, post-game suspension and, the banishment and everything else. But we're in the one place in the multiverse where we don't seem to care about it. And we're just going to, we're going to fine you, and we're going to give that money to NCAA charities and to our end of the year kegger and everything else. And we're going to rent out the bar up top above San Elmo, and it's going to, there'll be punch and pie for all. But, I just think that it's a dark day in enforcement. That was the best they could come up with. But, we'll see what future enforcement things look like. Don't you dare touch the third rail on something that they actually do care about, because, then it won't be fines.
We have had recruiting violations in the past, and I won't even touch the Ohio State 2010 situation. That's a whole other matter. That's just a ridiculous comparison that just to this day just irritates me beyond belief. That ruined 3 football seasons for guys that already had accomplished what they accomplished. The wins were already on the board. So suspend them for breaking the rules, but the breaking the rules did not impact the games that they won. Anyway, we've seen other situations where there were like recruiting violations that impacted one player getting on the field, and wins were vacated for the impact of that one player that may have been insignificant, but by the letter of the law stating that, okay, this one player recruiting violations resulted in this player signing with this team or whatever, we're vacating wins. And here we have a situation where the direct correlation is immediate. It's direct. Cheating impacts games. It's even stated 3 times in the summary that the intent was to gain a significant competitive advantage. And so why is that direct correlation not made that this impacts games and championships? That's the whole idea. Then you either say, then we don't fine them at all because they didn't do anything wrong.
Well, but the problem is throughout that entire report is the NCAA detailing that Michigan did a ton of crap wrong, and they lied and they obfuscated and they attempted to gain an advantage. And they also said a couple of times they did gain an advantage. But when you ask them, well, why wasn't vacating games on the table? It's because, well, that's in the charter and in the rules, it's about ineligible players. That's the only trigger. However, that's not the case because Penn State vacated games for the Jerry Sandusky thing. And so there's also stipulations like things that are like beyond the ordinary can trigger vacating games, but they just didn't even consider that with this one. And, that's whatever. But Michigan fans are convinced that, they're celebrating. And I wrote this after the fact, like the real punishment here is not the fines. It's like it's just the NCAA detailing. Yes, Michigan cheated. Yes, Jim Harbaugh is corrupt in terms of 14 years now of show causes, and the program. You're going to have now another year where next year you're talking to a Michigan head coach about a suspension, and like this is an every year thing. So this is the program that used to say they are above all of the cheating and they do things the right way. And there are still people who tell you they do things the right way. And it's the NCAA's entire report is, no, you didn't do things the right way. And one of the first things in the report says a postseason ban is required in this case. And then a couple sentences later, it's like Michigan is also a repeat violator, which would have triggered another postseason ban. So a couple of years ago, this would have been a 2-year postseason ban, but because of the kinder, gentler NCAA, like that's not really on the table any longer. But then they just went on and detailed all of the things that Michigan and Jim Harbaugh did that they did not approve of. So this is not a clean program. This is not Michigan getting away with anything. They didn't get the punishment that a lot of people wanted, but the NCAA is confirming cheating and lying and destruction of evidence. Like how throwing, like Connor Stalions talking about throwing his phone and hard drives in a pond. Like Jim Harbaugh never producing actual communication. And when you talk about Harbaugh in that report, so that when you do a control F Harbaugh, and then just in the first couple of pages, these are some of the things that they said about Harbaugh: failure to monitor, violated the principles of head coach responsibility, did not embrace responsibility, had a contentious relationship with Michigan's compliance office, failed to demonstrate that he adequately promoted compliance, and is failed to cooperate, is automatically responsible for the scouting and recruiting violations, and the other members of the staff. One recruiting staff member said the Michigan compliance staff was shitty at their jobs and actively working against us from the inside. True scum of the earth. This is a clean program. And they talk about their compliance department this way. And they talk about the NCAA and the way they treat the NCAA. And, we all say what we want about the NCAA. But this was the NCAA doing the biggest punishment they could do is not the fines. That'll come out of somebody's couch cushions. But throwing out there, this was not a clean program, and Jim Harbaugh is gone because of that. And if he came back, he'd be suspended for a year because of what he's done and not done. And so, yes, Michigan, they didn't get a postseason ban because it wasn't on the table anymore. They didn't get any vacant games because that's not on the table anymore. Doesn't make them innocent of any of this. That's what the NCAA is saying.
Yeah, they were so uncooperative with the investigation, so brazen in their cheating. It's too bad we can't do anything about it. Was kind of the notion in the stupid, readout of the thing. But whatever, the chapter's closed and we move on with our lives. And in November, we will have a rare matchup of the last 2 national champions, and presumably there'll be a lot on the line. So let's not fast forward to November, though. Let's play the 11 games in the interim and shake it up and see what falls out, as Keith Jackson used to say.
Well, I will tip my cap to Michigan continuing the finest assistant head coaching on the field training program in the history of college football. This will be like 5 consecutive years, whatever it is, 4 consecutive years that an assistant coach will get the on-the-job head coaching training on game day. So they've got that mastered.
The first low-level recruiting lackey to call plays in Big Ten history. So, yeah.
All right, back to the Buckeyes. Here we go.
Can I say one other thing, Mark?
Sure.
Jim Harbaugh talking about, he once said it's hard to beat the cheaters. He said about Ohio State, they're going to beat Ohio State or die trying, and then suddenly they started beating Ohio State. After he won a national championship in 2023, he was asked what it meant to be a Michigan man. He said, "You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal." After leaving Michigan for the NFL, he said, "If you cheat to win, you've already lost." And so that's just just one last thing to think about in all of this.
There you go. All right. Steve had suggested, Kevin, you didn't get the memo, that we run down the potential 2 deep or the starters on opening day. And all of your predictions for all the position unit starters.
I can follow along. I won't lead this, but I've certainly got opinions, but it sounds like Steve came in prepared, so I'll defer.
Well,
Steve's coming in hot.
I'll predict quarterback, and then you guys can take it from there.
Fair enough.
Steve, where do you want to start? Running back?
I guess just start at the top on offense. Like you said, we
Okay.
got the news this week. It'll be saying starting, and it makes you wonder if there is a Keenholz package that's out there for the red zone. Not sure if they would unveil a gimmicky thing like that against Texas. We all remember how gimmicky it got when they put in Tate Martell a few years ago. There were false starts and fumbles everywhere, and very few touchdowns derived from that. And of course, Devin Brown boogered himself up against Penn State, getting smacked hard on the goal line in the Devin Brown run package. But I don't know. If I'm in the red zone, I'm going to throw it up to that cat Jeremiah Smith and let him go up and make a play. That's probably the surest way to score a touchdown, or just let the running or the wide receivers run off and hit Max Clear over the middle, wide open in the middle of the field where nobody's going to be. So those seem like the two options to me. But saying and then Keenholz, I think, makes the most sense, obviously.
Yeah, the red zone package, as you said, just throw it up to Jeremiah, throw it up to Carnell Tate. I think one of the problems with the red zone package and labeling somebody as the running threat happened to Devin Brown. It's like, well, okay, I've got to be the guy that sticks my nose in there and does stuff that a quarterback shouldn't do, and then you get hurt. Julian saying can keep the ball, like he can pull it and run just fine. So I don't know if they need to do that. But Ryan Day said, in terms of, like, he went through all of the numbers of players that they feel are game ready, and he mentioned 3 running backs, and we know the first 2. And I asked for clarification on the third. He's like, I'm not going to get into that. We'll let Coach Locke get into that. But my belief is that it's Bo Jackson as that number 3 guy.
No doubt.
And I would expect him to play this year too.
So
Getting ahead of ourselves, is Jeremiah Smith, is he good enough to start?
maybe.
I'm interested to see how deep they go at receiver, because it didn't sound like Ryan Day was convinced they're going to go all that deep, because he was throwing out numbers in terms of, we've got 6 or 7 offensive linemen we like. We've got 3 running backs. Not sure about receivers. I think right now they've got 4, with Bryson Rogers being that 4th. And can they get Mylan Graham to be that 5th? Sounds like, I think Steve freshmen are still kind of a bit of ways, although we did see Phillip Bell get that black stripe off.
Yep. So Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis is the starters, with Mylan Graham, Bryson Rogers, and maybe Quincy Porter. Maybe, I don't know. I'm at a loggerhead on that last one, as you said. Guess we'll get into the game and see who plays, but that's the easiest way to construct the 2 deep, is after they've actually played, not necessarily Texas, because a lot of the backups will only see a few plays, but against Grambling, you will see the entire second team out there together, and then you'll probably see the third team out there together too. So, I mean, it'll be a mishmash from probably the first series of the second half on.
Yeah, any freshman you see against Texas, those guys are going to play this year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Kevin, did you? Yeah,
No,
tell us about the receivers if you want to get to the receivers. I mean, tell us about the tight ends.
Well, the tight ends, I mean, we had a chance here to talk to Keenan Bailey, and he made it sound like there are a lot of tight end coaches hoping to have 1 or 2 good ones. He wants to have 3, 4, 5, 6. And when you have, Max Clare come over via the transfer portal, and he did what he did at Purdue, I mean, that's, you've probably got the best all-around tight end that you can have right there. And then you got Kasmerick, who's like the best blocking tight end. And we haven't even gotten into Bennett Christian or Jelani Thurman or anybody like that at that point. So there's a lot of depth there. We do see Ohio State run a lot of 12 personnel, which is 1 back, 2 tights. So I could see a case of Claire and Kasmerick being out there as the guys. But, I think that it's a case of they're going to rotate a decent amount, because they've got all these guys that are, game worthy. And that's, the important thing, I mean, is to try and get these guys in at, in points where they can be productive.
Well, and we saw them play 4 or 5 guys in the playoffs at tight end last year. So they're going to play 4 guys. And then Keenan Bailey even said true freshman Nate Roberts is going to help them win games this year. So you could see another 5 guys out there this year.
I mean, they ran 14 personnel in one of the games in the postseason. So I mean, yeah, it's certainly not out of the realm. I mean, if you could see 4 tight ends in one play, that you're going to see, 4 tight ends in a game.
Yeah, they played 5 against Notre Dame, and not all at once, but they're deep. And they lost 2 of those guys, and they replaced them with guys who are just as good, if not better. And then, in terms of the offensive line, I think Ryan Day does not want to name any names, but finally acquiesced and named Austin Sierveld as a left tackle and didn't want to go any further than that. I think we can assume Austin Sierveld your center and Luke Montgomery your left guard. The right side, Steve, Philip Daniels seems to be taking the lead there, and Ethan Onion was battling at right tackle and maybe right guard with Tigger Shabola, but I don't think he's going to be able to overtake Shabola in just a few practices of fall camp when he's only ever been a tackle.
Yeah, I think if something happens to Carson Hinsman at center, it would be Josh Padilla would be the next guy up, and I think that he's among the trusted. And I think Ethan Onianwa, it sounds to me, is going to be kind of the 6th offensive lineman. So if any of the other 4, Sierveld, Montgomery, Shabola, or Daniels goes down, I think Ethan Onianwa goes in there in some regard, and maybe they would move somebody somewhere else or whatever. Maybe Daniel slides inside, and Onianwa plays tackle, or vice versa. So, yeah, that's kind of how I view it. I think Ian Moore at left tackle, backup. Gabe Van Sickle is a backup guard. And that's probably it for the guys that they really trust to go out there and play. Jake Cook is the first freshman offensive lineman to lose his stripe, and not the big timer from Toledo, Lowe. It wasn't him. So I don't know that Cook is ready to play. That would move him ahead of the twin brothers from St. Ed's, the Armstrong brothers. But again, we don't see enough of practice to know exactly what a rotation there looks like. But I think we got that on pretty strong authority, what the top 7 or 8 there look like.
Yeah, in terms of Doug Shepard asking who's number 7 and 8, I think it just depends on who is needed. Josh Padilla, as you said, they like him, but when Ryan Day says 6 or 7 guys that they trust, is that 7th guy Josh Padilla? Is it Ian Moore? And so I think that's still being worked out. Then also Luke Montgomery can play center as well. So if something did happen to Carson Hinsman, do they want Montgomery to slide over? Do they put in Padilla so that they don't have to move multiple guys over? The good news is they have the flexibility to do all of that, and those guys will get better. He did say he expects to rotate guys against Texas, which is interesting to me because they rotated on the interior last year. I wonder if they rotate on the exterior this year at right tackle.
That is interesting that he's kind of committed to that.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, it didn't happen against Texas because, it was a real close game, and it didn't happen against Grambling because it was not a competitive game. We'll, believe it and see it and dissect it in a postmortem once we see that. And, for like Josh Padilla potentially being number 7 or whatever, I mean, he's kind of in that, break glass in case of emergency. I mean, you want your backup center to really focus on centering. You don't want to sit there and have him, splitting reps between, guard, tackle, and center and everything else. So you kind of wonder how that breaks out. But, as I said, I just done an interview down in Austin earlier today, and I think this is going to be one of Ohio State's deepest lines in, quite some time. It's just going to be a matter of how quickly do they come together, and, does Philip Daniels hold that tackle's position? Does Ethan Onianwa does he come in here at the last second, and is he able to, disrupt the line and force his way in? and it's going to be a work in progress. So just because what you see against Texas isn't what you're going to see against Wisconsin, isn't what you're going to see against the team up north. It's going to be constantly changing. And again, while you want your offensive line to be somewhat stable because it's 5 guys having to play as one unit, you need to constantly be evaluating and reevaluating to make sure you got your best 5 out there.
On to the defense, Steve.
Yeah, I think we can pretty much tell you without much reservation, the starting defensive tackles are going to be Caden McDonald and Edric Houston. Houston missed some time early in camp with an apparent knee sprain, but it seems like he is back practicing. It sounds like Kenyatta Jackson will start at one defensive end position, and it looks like the senior Caden Curry will start at the other. The questions kind of come up beyond those guys. Logan George at defensive end had a pretty good spring, but I think he's been a little bit banged up from everything I can determine right now. And that's kind of opened the door, I think, for the North Carolina transfer Bo Atkinson and the converted linebacker CJ Hicks to probably move into the 2 deep at this point. Taiwan Malone, Will Smith Jr., I think, are probably the backup defensive tackles. Jason Moore would be in that mix, but I think Moore has been hobbled a little bit. His foot was in a boot as he was coming off the practice field yesterday. So not sure where that leaves him. You have Eric Mensah, a 302-pound redshirt freshman to help out at defensive tackle. Jarquez Carter is an interesting name. True freshman, very highly rated coming in. And we will see if he gets on the field, probably not so much for Texas, but obviously the 2 games after that, Grambling and Ohio, they'll have a chance to really air out a lot of the second and third team guys and see who can play when the lights go on and who can't. So that'll give you an idea. I don't know if I've missed anybody that's figures to play. That's a lot of names on the defensive line. They're going to have to replace a ton of production from last year's group. All 4 of the starters are in NFL camps right now and trying to make NFL rosters. So that's going to be a lot to replace up front with the big 4 up front.
It sounds like Jarquez Carter might be that number 6 guy right now, and Larry Johnson isn't sure that he'll get on the field, but he's working towards it. And yeah, Edric Houston said he'd be good to go for Texas. And when we talked to him last week, and I said, "So where are you now?" He's like, "I'm not talking about that." But yeah, they've been a little banged up on the interior, which is where they really can't afford to do it. But they have bodies. We'll see what they become.
Yeah, I just nod and agree. I mean, I think that it'll be interesting to see how much Bo Atkinson, how many snaps he's going to be able to get, because I mean, he comes in, with more production numbers than really anybody else. I mean, granted, it was somewhere else and in a different system and under different circumstances, but do you go with Kenyatta and Bo as your first teamers and then bring in Caden Curry, who is kind of your change up as a little bit of a smaller guy, but incredible motor. How do you handle that? And yeah, the concern is going to be on the interior defensive line, just because there is not the depth there. I mean, I think that they would have probably tried to even harder to keep Hero Canoe if they would have known just how thin they were going to be at defensive tackle.
Well, and Larry Johnson said when we talked to him that he wants Caden McDonald to be able to play 25, 35 snaps a game. That's half the game. So they've got to figure out what they're going to do when he's not out there. And I do expect him to play Bo Atkinson on the inside at times and Caden Curry on the inside at times. So they're going to get some defensive tackle snaps out of those defensive ends as well. And then maybe also get some defensive end snaps out of those linebackers, Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. Just keep an eye on that. We'll see what happens there as some pass rushing edge rushers.
Before we move on to the secondary, you see down on the bottom ticker there, you can become a member here at the Voice of College Football Ohio State. You got the Block O tier. Used to have my Block O Woody Hayes cap. I don't know what happened at that thing. That was my favorite. You got JT Wasn't Short And you could join the Jeremiah Smith tier. We don't give a damn. So sign up today, become a Buckeye member here at the Voice of College Football, and you can read up on all the various benefits. On to the DBs.
Well, we got linebackers.
Oh, got the linebackers. Yes.
Yep. Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese are the starters. Peyton Pierce. And I'm not sure if it's Riley Pettyjohn or Garrett Stover. They said they were 4 deep. I can't figure out if it's Stover or Pettyjohn, but they seem pretty happy with the depth there at linebacker.
Yeah, I wrote about that as well. It's like, well, if you're asking me to put money on one or the other, I'm probably going to say that number 4 is Riley Pettyjohn, just because of the way everybody keeps talking about him, but also we keep asking about him, so they're going to talk about him. But yeah, and I know they'd like Garrett Stover to step up and be a guy on special teams, because they always talk about how fast he is and he can get down the field. But I feel like they like their linebackers, that's for sure.
Yeah, Peyton Pierce would be your third linebacker if they went into a 4-3 as opposed to the 4-2-5. Something to remember on Garrett Stover, he was a safety in high school, so he's still kind of learning the position. So, just based on everything I've heard and then trying to make sense of it all, I would probably have Pettyjohn slightly ahead at this point, but that's speculation.
On to the secondary.
Do it.
Cornerbacks. You have Davison Igbinosun, who is one of the 3 returning starters on the defense, along with Caleb Downs at safety and Sonny Styles at linebacker. But Davison Igbinosun at corner. Jermaine Matthews Jr. replaces Denzel Burke at corner. And to start the season, it looks like it'll be Lorenzo Styles Jr. as the nickel corner, doing the slot corner duties. Then the All-American Caleb Downs back at safety, with Jalen McClain most likely, it seems like, as the other safety, and Malik Hartford right there almost bracketed with him. And then the 4th safety, that one is a tough call. Fahim Delane, a true freshman, is probably in that mix, but every time this comes up, they also mention one of the unheralded guys,
Leroy Roker.
Leroy Roker. His name comes up every once in a while, so I'd say that they're probably both pick one of them out of a hat going to play. And the backup corners, Devin Sanchez, a true freshman, Aaron Scott Jr., a backup corner, and Bryce West feels like he would be the backup to Lorenzo Styles Jr. at the nickelback. And I had one pretty good source said that it wouldn't surprise him 4 or 5 games into the season if Bryce West's play snap count goes this way and Lorenzo Styles Jr.'s kind of goes the other way, because Bryce West, it feels like, is really coming on in his second year as a redshirt freshman. Aaron Scott played enough games last year that he is a sophomore. Devin Sanchez, one of the top 5 players in the country in the 2025 class, he is a true freshman and is expected to play. So that's kind of my snapshot of the secondary, but I am definitely open to interpretation on any of that.
I think it's interesting that Ryan Day said they've got 4 corners that they believe can play, and so that would include Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez. One of my questions is, he said we've got 2 nickel backs, so you assume one is Lorenzo Styles. Is he counting when Caleb Downs is playing nickel, or is he talking Bryce West? I know we've seen Bryce West. He was really good on day 3 at outside corner, but we also know he's been playing plenty of nickel. So if they feel good about him as well, I think that's really good. And then talking with Matt Guerrieri this week about Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford, I asked him, so do you consider yourself having 3 starters? And he's like, we don't like that term. Basically, if you're game ready, then that's what they're talking about. So Malik Hartford and Jalen McClain are both game ready. The problem is they kind of play different positions, and the biggest problem for Malik Hartford is he plays Caleb Downs' position, but also Caleb Downs can play any position, so he can move around, and those guys can all move around. So I think you'll see all 3 of those guys on the field, maybe together at times.
Yeah, obviously this, the secondary is going to have the identity of Caleb Downs, and rightfully so. People will sleep on IGB. I mean, I've certainly read the comments, not in this chat, but in other chats about how many pass interference penalties is he going to have or whatever. I mean, you're just going to have handsy moments in the secondary, and sometimes you get away with it and sometimes you don't. And they certainly work with him in the offseason about, getting advantages without maybe getting flagged. So, we'll see at this point. I'm expecting a big season out of Jermaine Matthews, just because I just think that even though, it's a case of where I don't think teams are going to necessarily be afraid to throw against IGB. I think teams are going to try and isolate Jermaine Matthews a little bit until Jermaine Matthews gives some reason not to. And then at safety, yeah, I really will be interested in seeing kind of the breakdown of how much McLean and how much Hartford is going to be out there, because I'm a big supporter of Malik Hartford. I think he's really good, but to Tony's point, he largely does the position that Caleb does. And while Caleb can kind of do everything, you want to sit there and do you want to sit there and put Caleb in something that maybe is not his strongest aspect to get Hartford out there? I don't know. It's all above my pay grade.
And in terms of the IGB, the Davis Igbenogson stuff, he talked about his issue last year was basically not turning his head and playing the ball. If he would do that, then he wouldn't be flagged as much. I think there were some issues though where he's grabbing even before the ball isn't necessarily in the air, so that you get some holdings in there as well. But he's been working on it. He and Tim Walton have been focused on it. So he's still going to get called, because it's hard to go an entire season without getting a PI, but he's more focused on being where he needs to be at the top end of the route, getting his head around and getting his hands playing the ball rather than just playing the jersey.
We have not had a lot of talk about the specialists, but obviously Jaden Fielding is the kicker. Jackson Corville, a sophomore, is there as the backup. Looks like Joe McGuire is still the punter, although they said Nick McLarty is better well equipped than he was maybe a year ago to go in there and punt as well. So maybe they split that at times. I don't even know how they would go about that, but or why they would, but potentially that's a thing to get them both some kicks. Kick returner, your guess is as good as mine. Mylan Graham, Turbo Rogers, maybe the running backs. I don't know who's back there. I assume Brandon Ennis is going to continue as the punt returner, but when you want to win a game or you need to spark a big one, I think good old number 2, Caleb Downs, would be my choice.
You said spark a big one. A year ago tomorrow, Ryan Day declared Nick McLarty the starting punter and said he'd be the first guy out there. And then he did not finish well, and so he was not, and Joe McGuire was. And so there's still time for that job to flip. But Day did say either of those guys could kick in the game, but Joe McGuire is the incumbent. And Kevin, we have not seen any kick return at all but again, we only saw the first 3 days. So if you want to throw some names out there, feel free. Steve threw some names out there for kick return. I wouldn't mind seeing like a Bo Jackson, something to get him the ball, but I don't know what to expect there either.
I think Ohio State in a lot of ways is content just fielding kicks and taking fair catches, and let's hold on to possession of the ball. I mean, we nearly saw some sudden changes with trying to make plays that weren't there. I mean, obviously we're far removed from the days of Jalen Marshall where it was either going to be a turnover or a touchdown. I don't know. I mean, in terms of kick returners, just don't have a real good, idea. I mean, and I don't necessarily want to be putting like a Carnell Tate or somebody out there, somebody that, every car crash that you can avoid, let's avoid. So, I don't know. Do we chart specialists even? Do we even really watch them, or is that when you're still kind of coming back from getting a popcorn and sit down? It's like just awaiting first down.
Yeah, pretty much with
The
Ohio
la-
State. Not much to talk about.
Well, in the last 2 years, they've averaged about one kickoff return per game. So it hasn't been something they've been interested in doing since Emeka Egbuka was a true freshman, and he was really good. And then he got like banged on the head, and they were like, "Well, you can't do that anymore." So, or that was actually Paris Campbell back in like 2018. But Emeka Egbuka, as a freshman, averaged 29 yards a kick, and then it's just since they changed the rule to where a fair catch puts you at the 25, it's just like let's get going and go from there.
That only makes sense, even though I don't agree with that rule. It seems to completely contradict the structure of the field and the game. That you catch a ball at the 1, it goes to the 25. You catch a ball at the 24, it goes to the 25. That makes no sense. Anyway.
I talked with Bill Carollo a couple of years ago at Big Ten Media Days about adopting the NFL's rule. He's like, well, we will look at it. And the Big Ten, he said, the Big Ten could do that if they want, and it doesn't matter if anybody else is doing it. They could go ahead and adopt that rule. But it's like when a non-conference team is coming in, they would have to agree to play to that rule, which they wouldn't.
Yeah, special teams has pretty much been eliminated in regards to not the punting aspect or the kicking aspect, but the coverage and the return units significantly diminished for sure, which I think takes away from the game, but I understand the health factors. Tony, what's going on this week?
We'll be dropping our 2025 bold predictions for the season on the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I have to record also a Michigan that we do a preseason tail of the tape comparing position by position, Ohio State and Michigan. So we got to get that done. Probably drop that on Monday, hopefully. And then, do some writing as well. Just threw up a story yesterday about what we've been talking about with the depth charts and how many players are game ready. So you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com right now.
Kevin.
Yeah. I'm going to sit down probably on Monday and actually write tail of the tape for Texas. I've kind of got some notes in there, but haven't written it down, giving Ohio State every chance as possible to give me information on Ohio State, because Lord knows, if I'm wrong about a starter on Texas, it's not the end of the world. If I'm wrong about a starter on the Ohio State side of things, that looks bad. So I'm kind of kicking the can down the road. I've been working a lot on our YouTube channel, cutting shorts and things like that. But I'll probably do something coming out of week 0 games, just 5 thoughts or something like that. I'm sure 3 of them will be. I don't want Ohio State playing a week 0 game, but we'll see. So keep it locked in at Buckeye Huddle.
What you got, Steve?
Yeah, just a lot of the same stuff, getting ready for the season, a lot of the standing features that I do, like picks and the game data and first look on Texas. We'll start that on Sunday. And, it's time to fire it up. I've got a couple other things, maybe a season prediction and some other things that I'm kind of batting around back and forth, but just stop in at bucknuts.com. We've got all kinds of stuff. We've talked to let's see, the secondary and the tight ends this week, and we've got plenty of stuff on all that. So stop in, say hi, and it's going to be a fun season beginning next week with Texas.
Doreen, good to see you. Of course, you can catch Doreen here at the Voice of College Football on the main channel, along with Minnie Hunt on Sunday nights. And Yakov coming in with this one. Arvell Reese slightly reminding me of number 56 left tackle.
Lawrence Taylor.
Oh, Lawrence Taylor.
I will say,
okay.
Different
I like
positions.
this kind of pot.
Not LaDainian Tomlinson. Okay. Yeah.
Arvell Reese is 1 inch taller and 10 pounds heavier. We'll just throw that out there. And I think he could do very well as an edge rusher. And Ohio State did move him to defensive end for a spell as a true freshman before they moved him back to linebacker. But of course, LT was also an outside linebacker, and the Giants all 3-4. Can't really do a 3-4 anymore because of the way the game has evolved.
And me not translating LT to LT when it was clearly linebacker statement shows you that I do way too much prep for these teams and see LT all over the place. Meaning left tackle. All right, folks, we'll make it on back next week. We don't know exactly when, but it could be Wednesday. That's our regular time, but that's why you subscribe. Hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. And in the meantime, check out Steve, Kevin, and Tony's work. And we'll see you back here next week for the big Texas preview.